Hello. This is me on Monday. I'll post this so it comes up tomorrow. I'm in Monday's t-shirt still. I'm not wearing it 2 days in a row because I like it so much. Um, Socks is over on the desk there. I think he's about to spring over any second. I'm doing this a second time because I did it the last time without any sound, which is really annoying. Anyway, I talked for too long last time. Anyway, about the books that I was on about, so it's just as well. It's a form of ineluctable editing. Right. I'm going to talk about a few books off my shelf that I've talked about before, where I reach for things when I just need to dip into books. These are often silly books, books I've had for years and years, some of them, some from childhood, some from more recent years, some picture books, some poetry books. This is Peter Firmin, who created Basil Brush and illustrated lots of the small films stories, um, like Ivor the Engine and Noggin the Nog. This is his Winter of a Country Rat, the Winter Diary of a Country Rat. Now, this was a series of 3 books he did that featured Branwell the Country Rat and Lukin the Little Bad Wolf. And they're a kind of parody of this, I think, in essence, the Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady, which was um, the big hit of the time. They discovered this journal of this woman who painted and drew and wrote about nature in in England in the Edwardian era. She's a kind of amateur naturalist. That's what she is, and she describes in her very very tidy writing the weather, nature, stuff that she sees. Whoops. Dragonflies, and she includes big patches of poetry, George Meredith and Spencer, people who everybody would have known then, and only English graduates have read these days. Tennyson. Let's see what she says for April, where we are now. This is the well, maybe all months, all seasons are good to follow like this, but I think spring is a nice time to be alert to what's going on with flowers and trees and stuff. But when you talk, when you read about adventures, cycled to Bushwood, a still grey day with beautifully dry roads, marches going out like a lamb. I did not go into the woods, which will be carpeted with primroses in a week or two's time, but I found quantities of primroses and sweet violets, both blue and white, on the banks of the fields and the roadside. Now, there's something wrong with me in that I want the story to take a sudden nasty turn, and she finds a dead body, or sees aliens, or something unexpected happens, and that's just me. That's my fault. Genre bending as ever. But wouldn't it be fun if she found something untoward amongst the primroses? Peter Firmin kind of sends this up in his Country Rat stories, in that he's presenting the fake journals and notebooks of these creatures as they travel about having adventures. And it's all, oh God, it's so nicely done. There's the lady artist's paint box. See, so it is very directly a spoof at times of the Edwardian lady. Paint boxes. I was talking just yesterday in a junk shop about tin paint boxes in the 70s made by Dale and Rowney, and what they'd be like, and how you'd mix your paints in the kind of recessed lid of the tin, and how those paints would smell. How wonderful that was. It's not the same now. You can still get Reeves paint tins, but the quality of the paint's not the same. I'm complaining about everything these days not being the same. I'm such an old fart. I'm sorry. But there was a particular smell. I think the smell is still there, but the paint's not as strong. I think that's true. Anyway, um, I kind of sent these kinds of the Edwardian ladies book up when I did last year my Beatrix Potter parody, The Tale of Toxic Positivity, by me and Beatrix Pottymouth, which is a very rude take on the watercolorist and naturalist Beatrix Potter. It's really quite rude. I love doing these drawings though and making these cartoons. It was the year after my book on Panda, and uh, it was such fun. I love I love working on things where you send pictures in and then see them produced so beautifully like this. It was also a spoof on the kind of rash of books that we've had in recent years, which seem very old-fashioned to me, which are all very middle-class, nice people telling you, isn't nature lovely? Go out and, buy a house for £500,000 and live in the countryside. The kind of bourgeois zeitgeist, as our good friend, the poet Jerry Potter, calls it. Right, more books from this eternal shelf. Here is a lovely book from the 70s, an American tie-in, I think, for The Rescuers, which was my favourite Disney film back then in '77, and still is my favourite Disney film. I had the LP of excerpts, which I knew off by heart and I could recite, especially Madame Medusa's dialogue. And there she is, the best of the Disney villains, even better to my taste than Cruella de Vil, which is sacrilege, I think, in some quarters, but to me, The Rescuers is my time. And because, yeah, the Dalmatians were back in the 60s, I think the ones you see that come out when you're a kid are the ones that stay with you the most. Although, as somebody reminded me, Disney films came back into the pictures years afterwards. There was a kind of rotating schedule, and so you'd go to the pictures and see an older one, like The Jungle Book or whatever. I was obsessed with Disney when I was a kid. Now, here's a fairy tale book by a French writer, published by Pushkin Books, which I think are a lovely publisher. Bit snooty looking, maybe, but they do nice things. This is a collection called The Good Little Devil and Other Tales by Pierre Gripari. Now, I became a bit obsessed with Pierre Gripari a few years ago. We went to Paris, as we often did, and found the street, the Rue Mouffetard, where he lived. He used to sit, apparently in the 60s, in a cafe and talk to all the local kids, and they would tell him stories or they'd help him with his, and his stories got quite wild. We went to that part of town, and it was quite magical, actually. We were there on a Sunday, and as we stood there in the town square, at the bottom of the Rue Mouffetard, all these pensioners came out, and there was a band and an accordionist, and they danced as if they danced every Sunday there. Nobody thought anything odd about it. So it was a kind of slightly fairy tale place. The Witch of Rue Mouffetard. There was once an old witch living in the Gobelin neighborhood in Paris, but she was dreadfully old and an ugly witch. Yet she really did want to be the most beautiful girl in the world. One sunny day, while reading The Witch's Times, she came across the following advertisement: Madame, you who are old and ugly, she shall become young and pretty. To achieve this, eat a little girl in tomato sauce. Underneath, in small letters, it said, but take care. Your little girl's first name absolutely must begin with the letter N. Now, a little girl whose name was Narnia happened to be living in the very same neighborhood. Nadia. Did I say? Or Narnia? It should be Nadia. Same neighborhood as the witch. She was the eldest daughter of Papa Said, perhaps you know him, who kept the Café Grocers on the Rue Broca. I shall have to eat Nadia, the witch decided. And you see that obviously these are the real kids. This is the real cafe. He was sat there um, laughing with them, involving them in his story. The drawings are lovely as well. Drawings are by, I think they're from the time, Puig Rosado. One fine day, Nadia had gone out to get some bread from the bakery when an old lady stopped and spoke to her. "Good morning, young Nadia." "Good morning, madame. Would you like to do me a good turn?" "What is it?" "Would you go and fetch a tin of tomato sauce from your daddy's shop from me? It would save me going, and I'm so tired already." Nadia agreed right away. She was a good-hearted girl. It ends, of course, in disaster. There's this dreadful thing with the old woman being in the cupboard, I think, and she comes out. It's the cupboard under the stairs. Oh, is that a different story? But it's really creepy. It's all kind of fun, but it goes a bit nasty at times. I think the thing about Gripari was he wasn't afraid to make the stories as dark as kids require them to be. Kids like scary stories, and the stories go that way. This is a longer selection than the one I initially bought, which was The Witch in the Broom Cupboard. And I think all of that book is included in this. It's a very odd way of doing things. But I actually prefer the shorter version. I thought it was more concise. The story that I remembered most was the title story of that one, The Witch in the Broom Cupboard. And that's the one where the witch comes creeping out. And it is just a bit, "Witchy witch beware, watch out for your derriere." And if you say that, that's when she comes creeping out from behind you, out of the broom cupboard. And it's very funny. "Witchy witch beware, watch out for your derriere." Anyway, he's one to look out for, Pierre Gripari. And I remember we went to look for the cafe where Papa Said and the children hung out with the author in the 60s. And of course, it's actually there. The bridge over the Rue Broca, it turns out to be a road about 3 stories up, crossing over. And you're in this gully, this dark gully full of graffiti and a cafe. And we sat in the open French windows of this cafe, having fruit juice and reading these bits out to each other from these stories. And then we went to the Natural History Museum to see the stuffed animal parade and the extinct creatures. And we had peppermint tea in the Paris Mosque and baklava. Anyway, that was summer a few years ago. I'm going to stop now and check that I've actually switched on the microphone this time. I hope so. Socks didn't come over. He shouted a bit. He's looking at me now. Can you see him? There's the cat. He's listening very attentively. As I said on another video today, Socks listens really carefully when I read. When I read aloud, he comes and sits on my lap and looks up in my face, assuming it's all for him, and it kind of is. He loves being read to, my cat. I made the other video reading more of my recent finds in terms of picture books for my Patreon page, which I am duty bound to tell you is there on patreon.com if you look at my name, and it costs mere pennies to subscribe to get lots of extra content, lots of extra chapters and stories and drawings, but also more recently longer videos from me chatting on and reading stuff out. Right, I shall stop. Please join me again in my next episode and look back at the older episodes and leave comments, because that's one of the nicest things, it turns out, about doing these little films is the interactions, hearing from all of you lot and hearing about what my mentions of books trigger off for you in your memory, and also hearing about following up on book recommendations. And I'd love to know what you think of the things you go off and find that I talk about. Okay, I'm going now. Click like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.